Setting active profile and config location from command line in Spring Boot. Thought for a couple of seconds. Here is your same structured beginner-friendly content for setting active profile and config location from command line in Spring Boot. Beginner, intermediate level, environment-based configuration, introduction. In a Spring Boot application, configuration often changes between environments such as development, testing, staging, production. For example, database URL may be different. Logging level may change. Server port may vary. Spring Boot solves this using profiles and external configuration files. Sometimes, instead of changing code or files manually, we want to set these values directly from the command line. This is useful when running the same app in different environments, deploying through CI/CD, using external config files, testing different setups quickly. Understanding this topic helps learners understand Spring profiles, external configuration, command line overrides, environment-based application behavior. What is an active profile in Spring Boot? A profile in Spring Boot is a way to load environment-specific configuration. In simple terms, profile equals a named environment configuration such as dev, test, or prod. Example concept: application.properties, application-dev.properties, application-prod.properties. If the active profile is dev, Spring Boot loads application.properties plus application-dev.properties. What is config location? Config location tells Spring Boot where to look for configuration files. In simple terms, config location equals path of the properties or YAML file that Spring Boot should read. Normally, Spring Boot looks in default places such as class path, config, but you can override this from the command line. Why set these from the command line? Setting profile and config location from command line is useful because it allows you to change application behavior without modifying code. Example concept: same jar file means different command means different environment. This is especially useful in server deployments, Docker containers, CI/CD pipelines, local testing, setting active profile from command line. The command line property for active profile is -spring profiles active. Example Java, :myapp.jar, -spring profiles active equals dev. This tells Spring Boot, activate dev profile, load application-dev.properties or application-dev.yml. How active profile works. Suppose you have application.properties app, name equals myapp, server.port 8080, application-dev.properties, server.port 8081, logging.level.root equals debug, command java-jar myapp.jar-spring profiles.active-dev result. Spring Boot loads base config from application.properties, dev overrides from application-dev.properties. Final result: server.port equals 8011, setting multiple active profiles. You can activate more than one profile. Example Java, jar, myapp.jar, -spring profiles.active, dev, cloud. This loads application-dev.properties, application-cloud.properties. Example concept: multiple profiles means combined configuration setting, config location, from command line. The command line property for config location is -spring.config location. Example java.jar myapp.jar. spring.config location, file.opt.config.application.properties. This tells Spring Boot to load configuration from that exact file location. Example with external folder java-jar myapp.jar -spring config location -file-opt config. If the folder contains application.properties, application-dev.properties, Spring Boot can load them from there. Example concept: external folder means app reads config outside jar. Difference between config location and default config search. Normally, Spring Boot searches its standard locations automatically. When you use -spring.config.location, you explicitly tell Spring Boot Where to load configuration from. This is useful when config is stored outside the application. Secrets config are mounted from a server. Same jar is reused with different config folders, setting both active profile and config location together. You can use both in the same command. Example, Java jar, myapp.jar, minus spring.profiles.active equals prod, minus spring.config location equals file.opt.config. This tells Spring Boot. Use config files from /opt config/ activate the prod profile. So it may load opt config application.properties, opt config application prod.properties. Example concept. External config plus active profile equals environment-specific deployment using shorter JVM style with D. You can also pass properties using JVM system properties. Active profile java-dspring.profiles.active equals dev jar myapp.jar. Config location java-dspring.config.location file text config jar myapp.jar. Both styles work, but the double dash style is more common in Spring Boot examples. Command line argument versus JVM property. Both of these are valid. Spring Boot style Java -jar myapp.jar -spring.profiles.active equals dev. JVM style Java dspring.profiles.active equals dev -jar myapp.jar. Difference -property -value means application argument, D property -value means JVM system property. In practice, both are widely used. Example project structure. SRC main resources, :application.properties, :application dev.properties, :application prod.properties. Run dev profile, Java jar myapp.jar -spring.profiles.active equals dev. Run prod profile, Java jar myapp.jar -spring.profiles.active equals prod. This allows one application build to behave differently in each environment. Example with YAML files. You can do the same with YAML. Application.yml, server, port 8080. Application dev.yml, server, port 8082. Logging, level root, debug, java-jar, myapp.jar -spring.profiles.active dev. Spring Boot loads the YAML files the same way. Important note about file paths. When using external config location, the path often starts with file. Example, -spring.config.location equals file home-user.config. This tells Spring Boot it is a file system path, not a class path resource. Config location for a single file versus directory. Single file, spring.config location, file.opt/config/custom.properties. This points to one exact file. Directory -spring.config.location equals file.opt.config. This points to a folder where Spring Boot searches for config files. Example concept. Single file means exact config. Folder means search for standard config names. Real-world example. Suppose you deploy the same jar to two environments. Dev server, Java jar myapp.jar -spring.profiles.active dev -spring.config location file.apps dev-config. Prod server, Java jar myapp.jar -spring.profiles.active prod -spring.config location file.apps prod config. Same application jar, different behavior. Example concept. One build means many environments. Common mistakes, wrong profile name. If you run -spring.profiles.active dev, but no file exists, like application dev.properties, the expected config will not load. Wrong external path. If the path is invalid, Spring Boot may fail to load config. Forgetting file prefix. Sometimes this causes path interpretation issues. Expecting profile file to load without base file. Profile files override base config, but do not fully replace all settings unless everything is defined there. Example concept. Wrong profile or wrong path means config not loaded correctly. Priority of command line properties. Command line arguments usually have very high priority in Spring Boot. This means they can override values from files. Example: application.properties server.port equals 8080. Command java-jar myapp.jar-server.port-9090. Final result, server.port equals 9090. This is why command line is very powerful for deployment. Advantages of setting these from command line. Advantages include no need to rebuild the application, flexible deployment, easy switching between environments, better CI/CD integration, supports externalized configuration. Example concept. Command line means flexible runtime control limitations. Challenges include long commands can be hard to manage, wrong path profile can break startup. Config may become confusing without documentation. Example concept. More flexibility means more care needed. Best practices: use profiles for environment-specific config, keep secrets outside the jar, use external config location in deployed environments, keep profile names simple, like dev, test, prod, and document the startup command clearly. Example concept. Clear config strategy means easier deployment, concepts laid. Understanding command line profile and config location settings helps learners understand what Spring profiles are, how to activate profiles at runtime, how external config loading works, how to change behavior without code changes, how Spring Boot supports environment-based deployment. This topic is important for building deployable and environment-aware Spring Boot applications. Simple definition: setting active profile and config location from command line. Using startup arguments to tell Spring Boot which environment profile to use and where to load configuration files from. Final summary. Spring Boot allows you to control configuration at runtime using command line arguments. You can set the active profile using -spring.profiles.active, the config file or folder location, using -spring.config.location. This makes it possible to run the same application in different environments without changing code or rebuilding the project. Understanding this concept is essential for Spring Boot deployment, profile management, and externalized configuration.